We're in Tucker Cemetery today. We're in eastern Pasco County. This is not to be confused with Tucker Hill Cemetery, which is in present-day Hernando County. Although these people may be related, I mean, it's not very far away. In fact, it's very close together. This is the oldest cemetery in Pasco County. They've been interring people on this ground since before 1855, although no one knows the exact date of the first interment. We do know that it was before 1855, and there are burials here dated 1855. The Thomas and Sarah Tucker, who owned this land, started the orange groves and pioneered this area, were apparently, according to records, the family history records of the Tucker family, descendants of earlier generations who have been in this area since 1790. Now, to dispute that would be futile, but just to call it into question is important and interesting, I believe, because 1790, if we think about that, we're in lower Central Florida. I mean, we're in an area where there were no white people, or very, very few white people, in 1790. So to say that there have been descendants, prior antecedents rather, in this area as early as 1790, I think is astonishing, to say the least, and I would think require a good deal of investigation. They would have been here before the first Seminole Indian War, and they certainly would have seen it through the second Seminole Indian War. This was ground zero for the second Seminole Indian War, this whole area, 100-mile radius. So that's astonishing. It says Thomas and Sarah Tucker settled here in 1842. Now that's the end of the Second Seminole War, what is generally considered to be the end, although there was no definitive date on which it ended, like, for example, World War II or the Civil War, etc. No armistice or anything like that. It was simply, that's just the date that the year that most historians agree on. It basically fizzled out, stopped. Indians moved south. Whatever other Indians were captured moved out to Oklahoma or wherever they were relocated to. So they would have come down basically during the Armed Occupation Act, which was a free land grab situation. This community was called Tuckertown at that point, and later became Richland when the railroad came through, and the railroad was down that way. I passed over to a while back. There's a lot of Tuckers buried here, so there's a lot of family history right here for sure. This first initial part was deeded to the county in 1965 for indigent status interrees. So the back part is the Tucker family plot. So the Tuckers, out of the goodness of their heart, deeded to the county this area to bury the indigent. And also, I find interesting, apparently during that deeding, a requirement for the county was that they were to care for this land in perpetuity for the descendants of the Tuckers and their slaves. So there are slaves and descendants of slaves buried in this ground, which I find very cool, because most of the cemeteries I visit were either one or the other, or there was some sort of separation. But out here, it was just everybody together, which I find very, very hopeful and inspiring. You can't apparently live together in life, but we can share the same ground in death. And hopefully that will give us a impetus to learn to share life as well. We're going to take a look at this ground. There's a lot of interesting things here. It's not ornate by any stretch. It's very inornate, but it's very, very cool. We'll check out the little marker sign first. That's kind of a shaded, or this will be better. I think this is a better view here. It says the exact same thing. Okay. Now, when I rolled up, there was a funeral home person and a county person that were doing something over here. I don't know what in the world they could be doing, unless this is some sort of, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. It wasn't like a. It's definitely some sort of burial related situation. I don't know what, but it's interesting. I should have asked, but I was talking about other stuff. I think I freaked the lady out. I started asking her historical questions, and she didn't know anything about Florida history and said as much, and kind of wrote out. But she asked me if she could help me, so I, well, heck yeah, if you know anything about this area, you could help me greatly. So what we're looking at now are all the indigents. Now, assuming, this is an assumption, as time goes by, people either find out where their kin are buried, or they get some money together and they're able to make stones, to buy stones. And I think that's what's happened here, because you still see a lot of these stones that are just, or these markers are just straight up bottom of the barrel cheap. And then others in the same area have stones. So someone has come along down the road years later and marked the graves, more or less made them more distinguished. We're coming up on an area, the lady called it, that I ran into, called it Babyland, quote unquote. And when you get up here, you'll see why. I don't ever get too emotional in cemeteries, but I got emotional in this one. This is a full out crier here. This is an area set aside for babies, infants, children, toddlers. And there's always been and always will be, a soft spot in my heart for children. And the death of a child is unfathomable. I can't even begin to imagine all the grief and pain that would be for the parents. The children certainly are in a far better place, but the parents have to go on. And it's all the things that I've been through with my children over the years. I can't even compare something like this. They're still alive, but these aren't. And these parents will never again touch these hands, wipe these little mouths, or wipe the tears away. They're just gone. And it's tragically sad. And then on the other side of this fence, this little gate we're going to go through now, this is the Tucker plot, quote unquote. The Tuckers apparently intermarried somewhere along the line with the Sullivans. There's some Sullivans right here. They're still interring people in this ground. This is a very large cemetery, a very large plot of ground for the amount of stones and burials we have. So we're assuming that there's a lot of unmarked graves here. They've talked about the slaves and descendants of slaves. Those are probably buried in here on this ground where we are right now. They just weren't marked. It wasn't usual, although we've seen it, it just was not usual to mark the grave of a slave. And these are all Tuckers. These coming up here are the main Tuckers. I should probably give a disclaimer now that there are Confederate soldiers buried here, so anybody that wants to pause the video should do so now. This is Thomas Tucker, 1865. Sarah Tucker, 1855. So he had to live 10 years alone. There's a man that served his country. And another one. Same company, same outfit. I don't see any dates of death there. Smith. '06. There's some interesting here. We're calling these baby. Keithel Maurice Tucker. More Tuckers. '96. Private Company B. Let's see, 1893 to 1917. He probably served in the First World War. May have died in combat. 1917 would put him there, and we certainly did lose some people there. Elmore Tucker, 1840. Hurst. Evans Felty. So these are all probably interrelated. The daughters married whomever, and that's who the last name is, but they all were, because of their descendancy, they were all able to gain entry to this burial ground. So those up in the corner are Sullivan's. One is earlier this year, and some of the others are fairly recent as well. So they must have intermarried in that family. Wallace, Weaver, Smith, Weaver, Tucker, Clarence Weaver, son of Ernest and Ada Tucker Weaver. This is a very prominent and current family in this area, so that's pretty exciting. And we'll get a back view of the overall cemetery. It's a very small portion that belongs to the Tuckers. The remainder belongs to the county indigent. So that's it for this site. We're going to move on to another one.